In the distant past, a primordial magic was born out of the absolute void. This mysterious primordial energy felt completely alone in the emptiness. Unable to bear that loneliness any longer, it decided to take action. It unleashed the power of light and dimensions to bring something new to life. Thus, the first living being was born, a highly intelligent golden dragon. However, this dragon was also extremely arrogant from the moment of its birth. It looked at the primordial magic that created it and decided to open its giant mouth. Without hesitation, the golden dragon ended up consuming the very magic that had created it. But things would not be that easy for the proud creature. The power it swallowed was far too vast for its body to handle alone. Because of this, the golden dragon ended up expelling the excess energy. These two expelled masses gave rise to the red and blue dragons. As natural opposites, these two new beings did not get along from the very start. The moment they locked eyes, they felt an instant and intense rivalry. They began a fierce battle that continued for tens of thousands of years. While they fought, the golden dragon grew tired of watching and fell fast asleep. The residue from the two beasts' strikes accumulated, creating solid ground. Shortly after, this new land gave rise to the powerful green dragon. With the golden one still asleep, the three dragons continued to spread magic across the world. All of this accumulated energy caused various creatures to start appearing. Countless different life forms began to inhabit that vast territory. It was at this moment that the golden dragon finally woke up from its long slumber. It was shocked to see what a mess its precious home had become. Determined to clean it all up, it placed the elves who served it on the front lines. The plan was to eliminate the impure races, starting with the green dragon and the orcs. Suddenly, the scene changes to a soldier proudly showing off a picture of his daughter. He poses and tells his teammate that the beautiful young lady is his daughter, Jai Hai. The squad leader reminds him that they are right, in the middle of an important mission briefing. But the playful soldier says talking about his daughter is much more urgent right now. He even suggests that he would accept his teammate as the young lady's boyfriend. Just then, another soldier approaches, urgently calling for the squad's vice leader. The group leader maintains an extremely serious demeanor in front of his men. The soldier complains that the conflict has lasted for years, yet the leader is still too straight-laced. He insists on the question about dating, but the leader says he knows nothing about that. The sergeant finds it unbelievable that a young man knows nothing about girls or games. He jokes, saying the leader only knows how to shoot, and he isn't even that good at it. The sergeant asks if he was already in the special forces before the conflict started. A tiny lizard on the wall seems to watch that casual conversation with curiosity. The young leader calmly admits that he doesn't really know what he likes in life. Suddenly, the sergeant reaches out, handing his own phone over to him. He explains that it contains the photos and videos he left behind for his beloved family. The sergeant orders the young man to head to the rear, but he refuses right away. Smiling, the sergeant says that it is a direct order for him to make it through and be happy. The military vehicle begins to move noisily across the rugged terrain. A sudden and devastating strike hits the road with a brutal explosion from the terrible impact. The sergeant's phone is thrown violently through the air. The device glows under the full moon as it falls toward a dense forest. In the middle of the fall, a strange magical energy wraps around the glowing device. A dimensional portal opens, right before the creatures of the fantasy world. The phone falls to the ground in the middle of a fierce clash between elves and orcs. The phone screen shows the elves attacking fiercely to clear all the orcs from the area. The elves celebrate upon spotting the imposing presence of the legendary golden dragon in the sky. A blinding beam of light shines on the display, catching the attention of anyone nearby. In the middle of all that magical chaos, the phone ends up flying far off into the forest. The device slides smoothly across the dark soil under the glow of the full moon. Suddenly, a mystical energy begins to surround the device resting on the damp ground. Meanwhile, in the real world, a heavy rain falls on the tired and wounded soldiers. The vice leader takes command of the group, following the sad loss of their beloved sergeant. He orders everyone to fall back immediately to meet up with the main military force. At that moment, the young leader ends up bumping his foot against something metallic in the dark mud. He bends down and picks up the device, recognizing instantly who that object belonged to. The screen blinks, showing a blurry photo of the family of the sergeant who had just passed away. The young man holds the phone tightly, feeling the weight of the final promise he made to him. He remembers the oath to bring all his teammates back home safely. The soldier decides he will not run away to the rear alone, like his friend wanted him to. He promises himself that he will personally deliver that phone to the family of the departed. Back in the fantasy world, a small creature crawls peacefully through the woods. The small reptile scurries away in fear upon sensing the approach of a noisy army. Several orc warriors run with their weapons, ready to assist their fellow kinsmen. An elven archer fires a powerful, glowing magic arrow toward the enemies. The swift projectile scores a direct hit on the leg of one of the advancing orc warriors. The poor warrior cries out in pain, while his allies try to check the severity of the wound. The leader of the elves watches the scene with utter contempt, mocking that race. He calls the invaders pests of the forest and demands that they all surrender at once. A violent battle breaks out, with war cries echoing on all sides. An enraged orc charges with his heavy axe, trying to hit the agile opponents. With a simple movement, the elf creates a protective barrier, finding it all pathetic. He aims his glowing bow, promising to send the enemy straight to the afterlife. Suddenly, a devastating green breath attack strikes the battlefield, scattering the elves. The orcs celebrate upon seeing the green dragon, who is the true master of that forest. The powerful creature lands imposingly in front of its allies to protect them. It orders them to gather the wounded and retreat immediately into the depths of the woods. One of the orc warriors hesitates and asks about the fate of their home. He fears for the territory they fought so hard to conquer and keep under control. The dragon tells them they must abandon the place, but guarantees that this is not the end of it. It makes a solemn promise, using its own legendary name as an absolute guarantee. The guardian claims it is the one who gives and takes life in all the forests and swamps. It roars with fury, swearing revenge under its supreme title of the powerful green dragon. The orc warriors cheer up, swearing to reclaim the lands from those arrogant elves. With a deafening roar, the immense reptile swears that their revenge will be absolute. A mysterious voice mocks the oath, putting the green dragon on maximum alert. A devastating, glowing beam of energy strikes the beast's back without warning. The strike causes a terrible wound, making the creature stagger right in front of the orcs. The green warriors watch the scene completely terrified by such overwhelming power. The fearsome golden dragon appears, flying at high speed to crush its rival. It strikes the opponent with brutal force, slamming the green dragon onto the hard ground. It insults its rival, calling it an inferior creature and a despicable green shell. Desperate, the orcs realize they are standing before the supreme golden deity itself. The proud golden creature glows intensely, ready to wipe the enemies from the area. The green dragon questions with fury, by what right the invader brings so much destruction. The golden dragon gives a sarcastic laugh, completely mocking its opponent. It puffs out its chest, proclaiming with maximum authority that it is the absolute primordial being. With a flap of its wings, it rises into the air, leaving its wounded rival on the forest floor. The tyrant states that its words and actions are the only true justice around there. It questions whether it should just watch while its beautiful kingdom was overtaken by mud. An immense, luminous energy begins to concentrate in front of the powerful, proud dragon. The green dragon counters, saying that its rival's arrogance has crossed all acceptable limits. The golden ruler ignores the comment and says those were beautiful last words. It ironically wishes that the opponent finds some peace on the other side of that dimension. A colossal beam of magical energy is unleashed, devastating everything in its path. The green dragon begins to plunge down a dark abyss, cursing its cruel fate. It regrets not having the destructive power of the great red dragon's flames to fight back. The defeated dragon also wishes it had possessed the intelligence and wisdom of the powerful blue dragon. It swears that one day it will get its revenge against the pride of the terrible golden tyrant. Back in the real world, a human hand firmly holds the mystical egg that fell from the sky. The surviving surviving soldier stares at the mysterious object, completely unable to understand what is happening. He holds the glowing egg up against the light, trying to uncover the origin of that bizarre thing. Completely confused, the man kneels in the forest, deep in thought with the artifact in his hands. The narrative reveals that they are fighting in the Third World War on the Asian front. In a temporary shelter, a tiny pet lizard enjoys a delicious treat. The young soldier uses a pair of tweezers to gently feed the sergeant's pet reptile. One of the subordinates enters the area, urgently calling for the squad's vice leader. The messenger announces that the maintenance work on the equipment has been fully completed. Sergeant Lee Jian puts on his combat glove and asks them to let everyone know he is on his way. He walks out of the bunker with his head held high, while the other soldiers whisper among themselves in the trench. The surgeon approaches, asking what is going on upon seeing a young civilian girl there. The subordinates explain that the girl with the little dog came down the mountain to look for them. She holds out her hands, showing a few items she would like to trade for a bit of food, but with a cold and relentless look. Sergeant Lee Jian orders them to send the young girl away. The men around him look surprised and uncomfortable with their superior's insensitive attitude. Without giving any further explanation, the leader simply turns his back and begins to walk away from the group. Outraged by the man's coldness, the girl runs up and firmly grabs the sleeve of his uniform. The others try to step in while the little dog barks furiously, defending its young owner. Some soldiers comment in low voices about how the sergeant can manage to be so unfeeling. They whisper that he seems like a cold monster with not a single shred of humanity left in his chest. Suddenly, the man puts his hand into his uniform pocket, leaving the young girl startled by his reaction. Instead of scolding her, he secretly hands his own military rations over to the girl. Deep down, the soldiers know that without that surgeon's strictness, no one would have made it this far. The young girl smiles in relief, and the men begin to wonder what the leader used to do before the conflict. A strange, high-pitched buzz from the sky suddenly cuts through the silence of the military camp. The soldiers panic upon spotting enemy reconnaissance drones flying over the area. The sergeant shouts, ordering everyone to run to the trenches and prepare the air defenses. The young civilian tries to flee with her little dog, but ends up tripping amid the general panic. Realizing the imminent danger, the brave sergeant runs back to help the one left behind. His subordinates scream desperately, begging him not to take such a risk. The young leader ignores the warnings and focuses entirely on saving the defenseless little girl's life. A loud boom echoes across the battlefield as dust and fire rise into the sky. The soldiers scream in despair, fearing for their commander's life amidst the black smoke. Ignoring the explosions, the sergeant positions himself in front of the young civilian with his weapon drawn. He opens fire against the aerial threats, while shielding the frightened girl on the dirt ground. He remembers that before all this violent conflict started, his job used to be very different. He worked as a part-time attendant, taking care of cute reptiles at a pet shop. He loved spending his hours feeding each of those little animals with great patience. To the young sergeant, every life form on Earth was incredibly adorable. Taking care of those animals and seeing them grow up healthy brought genuine happiness to his heart. But now in the conflict, even though he received a lot of respect from his allies, none of it seemed to matter. No medal of honor or military glory could fill the emptiness he felt in his chest. The young sergeant takes off his helmet with an expression of extreme exhaustion from the fighting. The truth was that he only wanted to protect innocent lives in the midst of such absurd destruction. He throws himself toward an active explosive, wanting only to shield the defenseless little girl. Deep down, he just wished to return to a normal life, surrounded by small pets. He really wanted to be able to care for those helpless yet completely adorable little creatures again. As the danger draws near, he feels a powerful urge to stay alive no matter what. Suddenly, he finds himself holding that strange green egg in a completely pitch-black place. The young sergeant falls to his knees, trying to understand where the conflict went. All of a sudden. He notices that the mysterious green egg is glowing softly right in the middle of his hands. Surrounded by an infinite void, the soldier takes a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. His eyes widen in shock when a colossal voice begins to echo through that absolute darkness. He stares intently at the green egg while trying to reason whether this is all real or an illusion. The imposing voice introduces itself as the legendary entity that commands all the shadows of the forest. It goes on to say that it is the one that grants and takes away life in the deepest swamps. The majestic voice demands that he act in the name of the legendary green dragon to fulfill his duty. The spirit of the immense creature rises behind him, ordering the human to raise it with care. Startled by that bizarre apparition, the soldier ends up letting the precious egg slip from his hands. The mystical object rolls across the ground right in front of the glowing eyes of the gigantic green beast. The artifact taps lightly against the soft soil, making a thudding sound that breaks the tension in the area. The green dragon grows furious at the disrespect, demanding proper behavior from its chosen one. Out of a soldier's reflex, the young sergeant draws his pistol and points it straight at its head. The reptile chuckles, finding amusement in that useless attempt at a threat with a firearm, explains that its form there is the sacred accumulation of all the green dragon's past lives. The guardian claims that this imposing presence is merely a projection of its divine consciousness, but it completely loses its cool and stammers in fright upon feeling the barrel of the gun pressed right against its snout. Trembling with fear, the dragon suddenly changes its tone, praising the soldier's incomparable bravery. The young sergeant ignores the flattery and asks seriously where exactly they are right now. He stares at the immense creature and questions if he ended up perishing in the terrible explosion. The green dragon gives an enigmatic smile, confirming that his hypothesis is almost correct. The soldier becomes very worried and asks about the fate of his men and the little civilian girl. The reptile complains that it gave him the chance for a new life, yet the young man only thinks about trivial things. Running out of patience for speeches, the sergeant simply cocks the pistol, maintaining his threatening tone. Intimidated by the soldier, the dragon clumsily admits that it doesn't know what happened either. The creature thinks to itself that this chosen human is far too stubborn and dangerous. It is shocked to see that the sergeant was not intimidated for even a single second by its size. The soldier points the weapon and questions how the entity doesn't know if it was the one who brought him there. The dragon confesses that it chose him, but reveals that it wasn't its divine power that transported him. It explains that his soul was drawn in by the dimensional portal generated by the terrible golden dragon. While it wandered lost through the dimension of the departed, it witnessed the infinite void of its destiny. But right at the moment its consciousness was about to fade, a sacred and mechanical voice woke it up. The otherworldly system suggested that it used the new features of the Bix Rai application. The mysterious program on the screen instructed the entity to choose its very own human creator. This chosen creator needed to be the perfect warrior capable of rebuilding its ancient power. It looked for someone who could raise it and help it recover its lost strength. Someone who possessed a cold and calculating mind, just like the wise blue dragon has. And also an unrelenting combat fury, comparable to the destructive power of the red dragon. In the end, the soldier seemed to be the ideal choice to carry this burden. The green dragon becomes fully convinced that its choice was not wrong by any means. But the sergeant interrupts, asking about that artificial intelligence called Bix. Suddenly, a system screen opens before them, welcoming the new user. The program suggests that he take advantage of the functions of that new world to ease his journey. The green dragon is left in shock upon realizing that this is the legendary divine voice of the creator itself. The young man looks curiously at the phone, which suddenly began to float right before his eyes. The green beast explains that the creator decided to take direct action after the golden dragon broke the balance. The system screen glows, asking the sergeant to choose an initial race for his journey. The application displays the option of humans, who represent the perfect balance of freedom. Next, the races of the blacksmith dwarves and the elves, who live in deep introspection, appear. The green dragon roars in anger, saying it hates the elves and that they ought to be eliminated. It tries to convince the sergeant that the orcs are the strongest warriors to choose. The sergeant looks at the screen and thoughtfully repeats the name of that race of green warriors. Without paying much attention to the dragon's protests, he simply confirms the choice of the orc race. The green creature looks at the soldier, surprised by a decision made so quickly, and without any questioning, the system announces that by choosing a wild race, the extra points have increased his charisma and leadership. Several magic circles appear around the young sergeant, preparing the transfer process. He stares at his own glowing hands, not understanding the meaning of all those attributes. The green dragon begins to dissipate into the air, leaving only its mystical egg floating in the void. It whispers that the golden era of the tyrant will soon come to an end, and the green dawn will finally rise. The guardian asks the hero from another world to fight with all his might against the proud tyrant. It begs to be resurrected in the future, helping to build a powerful green legion. But Sergeant Lee Jian keeps firing relentlessly, paying no mind to the speech. The green dragon is outraged to realize that the human didn't even bother to listen to it. The image of the mystical beast vanishes completely, leaving only the green egg hovering in space. An immense pillar of light emerges, initiating his transfer to the new world once and for all. The soldier recalls his last sincere wish one more time before that major explosion. That was his final thought, but the artificial intelligence seems to have gotten it wrong. The AI certainly didn't pay close attention to the details of what he actually wanted to raise. Instead of cute pets, he was sent to train extremely dangerous creatures. He feels as if he is sinking into an ocean, while the system announces that he has tamed a slime. The weapon slips from his hand in the water, while a warm substance envelopes his entire body. The otherworldly system announces that the slime consumed the surgeon's pistol and began to evolve. The young soldier tries to breathe, but the lack of air in the darkness begins to make him desperate. Suddenly, he wakes up coughing heavily, lying on the grassy floor of a forest at night. Out of breath, the man tries to stand up and notices something moving slowly near his hand. An extremely cute and glowing little creature stares up at him with curiosity, making a friendly sound. Startled out of his wits, the soldier yells and flings the small purple monster away from him. He looks in horror at his own hand, which was left covered in that sticky slime, but the biggest shock comes when he realizes his body has undergone a radical transformation. He now has sharp teeth and pointed ears, just like the wild races of that new world. The sergeant examines his own body, trying to figure out what kind of monster he turned into there. In the middle of his thoughts, a desperate cry for help echoes through the dark woods of the region. The soldier recognizes the little civilian girl's voice and realizes she is in mortal danger nearby. Scaring sounds of hungry goblins echo from the entrance of a dark stone cave. Two of those small, ugly green creatures growl aggressively, cornering the little girl. The small goblins begin to tremble with fear upon sensing an intimidating presence behind them. The sergeant appears imposingly and tells the creatures to shut their mouths immediately in a cold tone. He stares at the little monsters with a terrifying look, making it clear they do not have permission to speak. Totally terrified, the goblins huddle on the ground, hoping they won't be devoured on the spot. Later in the shelter, the man organizes all his belongings collected on the journey over a cloth. The small purple and yellow slime makes a friendly sound, trying to get its new owner's attention. The sergeant analyzes the situation calmly, trying to draw up a strategic survival plan. Suddenly, the slimy little thing takes a joyful and excited leap right toward the surgeon's face. The slime attaches itself to the young man's chest, suddenly covering him with its sticky and warm texture. A bright bluish light shines on the spot, indicating that some skill has been activated by the system. At that moment, one of the goblins tries to strike him in the chest, but the blade doesn't even scratch the uniform. The sergeant notices that the slime in his hand is starting to take a solid form that is very familiar to him. The application from the other world confirms that the small slime has activated its transformation skill. Within a few seconds, a perfect replica of his military pistol materializes in his grip. The weapon functions identically to the real model, with the slide moving perfectly. He points the sight directly at the goblin's forehead, activating another system skill. With the total focus of a sniper, the sergeant prepares to put an end to the attacker. He pulls the trigger without a millisecond of hesitation to test the firepower of that new weapon. A precise and luminous shot hits the goblin's forehead, making him drop unconscious right then and there. The other goblin panics upon seeing his partner defeated with such ease and speed. The blue creature tries to fire an arrow, but the sergeant quickly ducks behind a boulder. He emerges from behind the cover, aiming his slime pistol toward the small blue archer. He fires twice in succession at the creature's chest, neutralizing the threat effortlessly. The blue goblin staggers dizzily before completely losing his strength and falling to the forest floor. He collapses unconscious next to his companion, bringing a definitive end to the quick clash in the woods. The sergeant observes the two enemies lying on the ground, surprised by the non-lethal effect of the shots. Panting, he examines the magical weapon, realizing just how useful that slime companion can be. With a snap, the golden pistol begins to melt, returning to its original viscous form. The slime reappears on the ground with swirling eyes, indicating it used up all its energy in the action. He notes down in his military logbook that the small slimy being seems friendly and very loyal to him. The man concludes that the little monster can copy any object it swallows until its energy runs out, but he notices that the copy's firepower is only equivalent to the impact of standard rubber bullets. Furthermore, the sergeant calculates that the transformation effect lasts for only 4 to 5 shots. Sitting in the shelter, the young sergeant decides to turn on the device to gather more useful information. He asks where he is and what he should do, but the artificial intelligence suggests making a call. The phone merely repeats the message, indicating it does not have enough data about that location. He sighs in frustration, realizing that the device's standard functions are blocked there as well. The small slime pushes the large green egg close to its owner's foot, catching his attention. He picks up the egg carefully, remembering the plea for help made by the legendary green dragon. He recalls the mission to resurrect it and build a powerful army to fight the golden dragon. He realizes he was practically abducted by that entity to serve as a mercenary. He turns abruptly and calls the attention of one of the captive goblins to try to interrogate him. The sergeant asks seriously if they are aliens, but the small ones only tremble in fear. He tries to find out their current location and asks if any of them understand the human language. Losing his patience, he demands immediate answers, making the small creatures bow in terror. He concludes that unlike that enormous green dragon, it is impossible to communicate with the natives. The young man decides that hatching the egg and speaking to the creature directly is the only logical path now. The soldier knows that in overly complex situations, planning too much can be dangerous. He defines survival as his primary goal and focuses on establishing a secure base of operations. He sets off without hesitation to explore the surrounding terrain and assess potential threats in the forest. A small green goblin lifts a heavy stone with both hands and lets out a loud shout in the middle of the forest. He slams the stone against the ground violently, kicking up dust while carrying out his work under the sergeant's orders. Li Jian watches calmly as the two captive goblins use stones to dig 2 deep pits in the soft earth. The sergeant knows very well that the greatest and most dangerous threat at that moment is the presence of those hostile forest natives. Upon analyzing their belongings, he notices that the monsters carried only enough blankets and rations for a single day of travel. He calls his slime back, concluding that the 2 prisoners are merely scouts sent on a patrol mission. The sergeant holds the slimy creature, which quickly transforms into a perfect replica of his combat pistol. Knowing that enemy reinforcements could arrive at any moment, he realizes he needs to gather information as soon as possible. If a friendly conversation does not work with the natives, he decides he will have to use a much more intimidating method with them. He draws a picture in the dirt and points to himself, saying his own name to start basic communication with the group. Next, the soldier points to the illustration of the two natives in the sand, repeating his name to see if they understand. The sergeant points directly at the pair of frightened prisoners, indicating that it is now their turn to identify themselves. He draws a few rustic huts on the packed dirt to represent their main camp and their group of allies. With a simple gesture, he makes a searching motion with his hand and asks the natives directly where the other warriors are. The green goblin begins to shout joyfully and points his finger toward a hill, while his blue companion sweats out of nervousness. He keeps pointing loudly, but the blue partner screams in despair, trying to shut his talkative companion's mouth. The blue prisoner turns red with anger and yells furiously at his partner for giving away their secret so easily. Without wasting time, the sergeant coldly presses the barrel of his loaded pistol right against the temple of the shouting blue goblin. He tells the little monster to shut up in a terrifying tone of voice that makes both creatures tremble with fear instantly. The sergeant's look turns incredibly dark as he warns them very clearly that there will be consequences if they do not speak. He points the weapon at the drawing in the dirt, showing what will happen to anyone who refuses to cooperate with the interrogation. He shows them the two pits they dug themselves, warning that their final destination will be inside there if they choose not to cooperate. Terrified by the threat, the two goblins immediately point in the same direction without hesitating for a single second more. He observes the horizon, realizing that the enemy camp is behind that mountain range, a bit farther than he expected. What he doesn't realize is that a mysterious figure is hidden in the bushes, closely watching every move the group makes. A young elf with glowing golden eyes focuses her attention on the sergeant, trying to figure out who that unusual being is. As a reward for the information, he offers them 2 pieces of roasted meat that actually belong to the captive's own bag. Moved by the unexpected feast, the 2 prisoners begin to cry tears of joy as they devour the delicious food. But suddenly, the eyes of both little monsters begin to glow intensely, leaving them completely startled by the effect. The sergeant takes a step back, surprised to see that the prisoners have begun to float, enveloped in a strange bluish energy. At the same time, the sergeant's phone begins to glow brightly on the grass next to the mystical green dragon egg. The system screen announces that feeding the natives that meat has triggered an unexpected monster-taming reaction. A large burst of light occurs, and the system confirms that the 2 goblin warriors have been successfully tamed by the sergeant. Completely confused by that bizarre situation, the sergeant receives a notification that he has learned the basic language of the demons. Hidden in the woods, the young elven warrior watches all of this, completely horrified by what she just witnessed there. She takes an agile leap backward, deciding to flee the area immediately to report that terrifying event to her leaders. The elf Cilia Tuscarella initiates a direct mental connection to urgently report the incident to the Council of Elders. Gigantic figures of elven elders appear on colossal pedestals of light, ready to hear the message from their young warrior. The rulers command the young combatant in imposing voices to speak up and report what she discovered that is so urgent in the forest. Kneeling, she explains that she found something unbelievable at the edge of the dark forest, very close to a human village. With her eyes wide with tension, the elf reveals that she discovered an orc inhabiting that wild region of the dark forest. A mental projection shows the image of Sergeant Li Jian standing next to his 2 new goblin servants kneeling on the grass. She shares that the mysterious orc is capable of using the highest level domination magic belonging to the legendary Green Dragon. The Great Elders react with extreme shock upon hearing that a simple orc possesses control over such a powerful divine magic. The young elf confirms the information with total seriousness, remaining kneeling before the imposing presence of her leaders. One of the elder leaders sighs heavily and pronounces Cilia's full name in a solemn manner to begin her judgment. He describes her as someone who has lost her usefulness, and then asks the young elven warrior's current age. A bit confused by the direction of that conversation, she replies that she is 150 years old by the count of the dragon eras. The elder gives a slight sigh of disdain, showing that he is extremely dissatisfied with the young elven warrior's stance. He complains, saying that back in his day, the youth were much more disciplined and did not act so recklessly in the forest. The young elf Celia is completely frozen in shock by the elder's unexpected and sharp reaction. The elders summon Callian Aramalt, who is known to everyone there as the powerful and respected son of divine light. Callian appears imposingly, and with his head held high before the Great Council, asking if he was called for any special reason. The elder looks sternly at the warrior, questioning if he is failing to control his subordinates' actions. He asks with fury if it makes any sense for a mere orc to use divine magic, and suggests a disciplinary talk behind the mother tree. The elders tell Callian to handle that situation with his own hands before vanishing completely in beams of light. Callian lets out a long sigh of extreme exhaustion and puts his hand to his head, calling for the young elven warrior with seriousness. He states that he perfectly understands her desire for revenge against the green dragon that took away her archery skills. However, the commander asserts that the legendary green dragon was completely eliminated, leaving no trace of magic behind. He reminds her that the golden dragon itself destroyed the rival, and that speaking of green magic with an orc is an absolute heresy. The elf tries to explain herself desperately, but her superior interrupts her with absolute authority, keeping his tone severe. He complains that she sent a foolish and groundless report directly to the Council of Light without consulting him first. The leader questions if she still does not understand how the military chain of command works, and orders her to dismiss herself. With her eyes full of tears and deeply frustrated, the young warrior merely lowers her head, accepting the direct order. She uses her teleportation magic, reappearing on her knees in the middle of the dark forest, consumed by a feeling of anger. Overcome with rage, the elf strikes the dirt ground violently, cursing those stubborn and foolish old men on the council. She rants, saying that it definitely was green magic, and questions if the elders have simply decided to ignore her words. The warrior swears she will hunt down and take that creature's head to prove the truth, no matter the cost to her. With a look filled with fury and determination, she vows to completely wipe out any trace of that green monster from her world. Meanwhile, in the forest, a creature resembling a yellow lizard fiercely attacks a large wild blue bird. Hidden in the bushes, the sergeant and his new companions watch the giant reptile swallow its prey in a violent manner. The goblins point excitedly at the creature, saying that monster is meat on the run and that it has a delicious flavor. Shortly after, a giant blue crab with a treasure chest shell walks noisily through the woods nearby. The small ones point to the enormous crustacean, explaining that this crawling meat has a very bad and bitter taste. Suddenly, a terrible and fierce spike boar emerges, roaring loudly and showing its sharp claws right in the middle of the path. The prisoners explain in fear that this monster represents highly potent and extremely dangerous meat in the forest. They reveal that gathering that beast's droppings was part of their coming-of-age test, but they all failed out of pure fear. The sergeant understands the situation and asks if it was because of this failure that the two ended up banished from their tribe. But the small creatures smile joyfully, saying that in the end everything worked out fine because they found their great green master. They celebrate, saying they are no longer afraid of anything. But the sergeant quickly spoils the moment by saying he is not their master. He warns that he is not an alien monster like them, but the small ones cling to his leg, insisting they are of the same race. One of the goblins extends his hand, asking the soldier to look closely at the similarities and notice that everyone has green skin. The sergeant looks down at his own greenish hand and is left completely speechless upon noticing how bizarre that scene is. The small ones feels that the demon race doesn't care about skin colors and that deep down, everyone is a beloved child of the forest. Night falls quickly over the dense woods, and a cozy campfire begins to crackle under the bright light of the full moon. The sergeant sits near the flames, writing in his notepad while his companions sleep peacefully. He reflects on the dangers of that forest, recalling the wild dinosaur, like creatures he saw earlier. He also remembers the gigantic crustaceans, concluding that danger is truly lurking in every corner of the place. The soldier notes his thoughts in his logbook, thinking that if this were another time, everything would be completely different. He fondly recalls the time he worked taking care of reptiles, and how excited he would be to see these rare animals. The small goblin sleeps deeply, drooling on the grass, while the pet slime watches him with great curiosity. But now, the sergeant's gaze is serious and cold, focused entirely on the burning flames of the campfire illuminating his tense face. He closes his eyes for a moment, reliving painful memories from his past that he preferred to forget forever. The rhythmic crackling of the wood burning in the campfire seems to echo the sound of the major explosions that shattered his old life. The fire glows with even greater intensity, bringing back terrible memories of a day when everything was consumed by flames. He remembers the day his hometown was devastated by a violent bombardment that destroyed everything around him. The screen of the phone forgotten in the dirt showed the desperate alert of an imminent airstrike over the entire capital region. Despair took over his tearful eyes as he realized there would be no safety for the people he loved so much. Emergency sirens wailed non-stop while explosions lit up the dark night, turning the city into ashes. He screams in despair on his knees amid the burning ruins, watching the missiles cross the sky and seal everyone's fate. A sudden snap of a branch breaking on the forest floor breaks the silence of the dark night around the camp. The sergeant opens his eyes immediately, snapping out of his painful memories and entering a state of maximum alert. The small slime takes a startled leap, making a sharp sound upon noticing the approach of unknown intruders in the woods. Lee John stands up quickly, gripping his pistol, and shouts, demanding to know who is hiding in the middle of the darkness. Two human travelers emerge from the bushes and are totally terrified upon coming face to face with the fearsome sergeant. The soldier lowers the aim of his weapon slightly, noticing with surprise that the figures before him are simple human civilians. Upon spotting the soldier's orc features, the two men panic and begin screaming incomprehensible things from there. The young sergeant makes a gesture with his free hand, calling for calm and trying to soothe the desperate travelers before him. But the two captive goblins interpret the situation as a threat and charge forward with their daggers, ready to attack the humans. The little monsters roar with fury while the sergeant shouts desperately, ordering them to stop the attack immediately. Suddenly, an elven woman's boot strikes the ground at high speed, cutting through the air with an agile and precise movement. The elf Silly appears like lightning on the battlefield, moving with incomparable dexterity to protect the civilians there. She quickly places herself between the attacking goblins and the two defenseless travelers, blocking the monster's advance. With extremely fast movements, she intercepts the blue goblin's attack, preventing him from harming the frightened humans. The elf performs a perfect spin in the air, preparing a devastating physical strike against the small forest attackers. She lands an extremely powerful heel kick right on the face of the blue goblin who was trying to advance against the civilians. The brutal impact sends the little monster flying far away, while the travelers watch the scene completely impressed. The blue goblin goes flying through the air, causing the sergeant and the green goblin to widen their eyes in surprise at that appearance. Cilia takes up a defensive stance in front of the humans, casting a deadly look in the direction of Sergeant Lee Jian. She draws her glowing sword, calling the soldier scum of the Green Dragon and telling him to remember her name before he perishes. The warrior advances slowly, sword in hand, proudly proclaiming her important title as the Sharp Fang of Light. With the blade pointed directly at the target, she shouts her own name, revealing herself to be the elf Cilia Tuscarella. She declares conflict against the ones she judges to be a terrible orc shaman and his foe, dangerous forest goblins. In the name of the sacred golden light, the elf vows with determination that she will exterminate those green pests without mercy. She points the sword in an imposing manner, repeating that she is the fearsome and relentless Fang of Light, Cilia Tuscarella. The elf continues her heated speech against what she believes is an evil orc shaman and his filthy goblin companion. Brandishing her weapon under the moonlight, she swears once more that she will annihilate all invaders in the name of the golden light. The sergeant stares at the girl with an expression of utter disbelief, not understanding a single word of what she is saying. He hears only strange and incomprehensible noises, wondering in confusion what on earth that elf is trying to say. He raises his hands, trying to explain that he doesn't want to fight, but his orc voice translates everything as incomprehensible grunts. The green goblin tries to help, explaining that the master speaks that way simply because he is a legitimate orc of the dark forest. Cilia panics and tells the civilians to fall back, warning them that the monster is about to cast a mind control spell. The soldier sighs, realizing that the situation is getting weirder and out of hand with that hysterical elf. Determined to avoid an unnecessary clash, he decides that firing a warning shot into the air is the best option right now. Points the pistol upward and pulls the trigger, but hears only a dry, metallic click coming from inside the gun's mechanism. The surgeon is left in complete shock upon realizing that the shot failed at the most critical moment of that confrontation. The small slime cries in despair, noticing that the special ammunition has completely run out, leaving the surgeon unarmed. He disassembles the pistol magazine in a hurry, seeing that there is no magical bullet available for use in that fight. Cilia's golden eyes flash with fury, decreeing that the orc's supposed evil conjuring will end right then and there. With an agile and acrobatic leap, the warrior launches herself into the air, preparing a deadly sword attack against her opponents. She descends at high speed, brandishing her glowing blade with the clear objective of striking the enemies on the ground. The elf aims her cutting strike directly toward the green goblin, who watches everything paralyzed with terror on the ground. The human travelers scream in fear as the warrior elf's blade slices through the air toward the small monster. The blue goblin remains down and unconscious on the grass, unable to help his companion who faces a real danger. The small green one closes his eyes, bracing for the worst as the sharp tip of the sword approaches at extreme speed. In an impressive reflex, the surgeon steps in front and blocks the sword strike using nothing but his bare arm. The elf's eyes widen in absolute shock on seeing that the orc managed to stop her sharp blade without using any weapon. He holds onto Cilia's lethal blade, feeling the blood flow, but maintains his firm and threatening gaze against the elf. With a sharp movement of his powerful arm, the surgeon flings the sword aside, completely throwing the elf off balance. He takes advantage of the opening to move forward, delivering a quick short, range strike to drive the elven warrior away. Cilia grinds her teeth in fury and pain as she feels the force of the physical impact delivered by the surgeon in the middle of the camp. She enters complete panic upon seeing the barrel of the pistol pointed straight at her face from such a short distance. In an extremely agile movement, the elf executes a backflip, evading the danger under the glow of the full moon. She slides her feet on the grass, backing away to maintain a safe distance while studying her opponent's movements. Holding her own chest with difficulty, the warrior coughs heavily and questions how a mere monster dares to wound her like that. Overcome by uncontrollable rage, she swears with all her might that she will fight using her full maximum power from then on. The elf begins to channel her mystical magic, invoking the spirits of the wind to strengthen the tips of her fingers and toes. She vows that she will annihilate all her enemies, while Sergeant Li Jian falls exhausted to his knees on the damp grass. Heavy drops of dark blood drip continuously from his injured hand, indicating the severity of his wounds in the fight. Out of breath, the soldier tries to stay steady while the green goblin approaches, crying and calling for his beloved master. He clenches his teeth in fury, realizing that the injury to his arm is much more severe than he initially thought. The sergeant tries to move his fingers, but realizes in desperation that his injured hand simply will not respond to his commands. Noticing the bleeding on his arm, the sergeant pushes the small green goblin away with force, telling him to flee the area quickly. He stands up with difficulty, promising that he will fight to buy as much time as possible for his allies' escape. With extreme effort, he tries to hold the slime pistol with his left hand to continue the clash against the swift elf. Suddenly, Silly is hit by a deep cut and bleeds, startled because she doesn't understand where that surprise attack came from. The sergeant is also struck by multiple slashing blows and collapses to his knees, spitting blood from his mouth in intense pain. He realizes in despair that the elf's speed is too absurd as she charges forward, delivering multiple attacks with her sword. To make matters worse, his pistol begins to melt rapidly in his fingers, returning to its viscous slime form. The sergeant stares at the unstable weapon, wondering if that will indeed be his final shot before losing the match. Cilia continues to circle the soldier at incredibly high speed, delivering slicing wind strikes on all sides. The sergeant tries to adjust his stance, tracking the opponent's rapid movements to try and land a clean shot on her. But in the blink of an eye, the elf appears right beside him with an intense look and delivers an unrelenting sword strike. She slashes the soldier once more, causing blood to spray through the air, while the green goblin watches everything in horror. The small goblin falls onto his back on the yellowed ground, trembling with dread at seeing his master defeated so easily. That moment, the elf's golden tiara falls straight into his hands, making the little monster let out a shout of surprise at the object. He stares at the magical artifact glowing intensely in his hands, not understanding how that valuable jewel ended up with him. Cilia walks staggeringly with her back to the soldier, seemingly having drained all her magical energy in that last strike. Suddenly, both the elven warrior and the small goblin collapse, exhausted on the grassy ground, bringing the fight to an end. The sergeant observes the two lying on the ground, holding what is left of his weapon, and wonders if he finally managed to beat her. But the pistol falls apart completely in his hands, and the pieces drop heavily to the ground, leaving the soldier unarmed. He falls to his knees, staring at the damp ground with sadness upon seeing the pool of inert slime lying right before his eyes. The goblin runs desperately and tries to gather the inert slime that scattered across the ground with his hands, crying in sadness. He holds the two separated parts of the slime, weeping heavily as he notices that the cute little creatures seems to have perished in the fight. Holding the remains of his slimy companion, the sergeant is overcome by a deep and painful melancholy right there. He remembers the terrible day he held his failing sergeant in his arms amid the devastating fire of that war. He also recalls the pain of losing his beloved pets in the explosion that destroyed his pet shop. At that moment, the otherworldly system announces that the soldier's psychological trauma has triggered a negative status effect on him. The warning on the screen reveals that the terrible berserker rage has been activated, causing the young man to scream in hatred toward the sky. With his eyes glowing a terrifying crimson red, he lets out a monstrous roar, releasing all his pent-up fury. A dark and malevolent aura envelopes his transformed body, while the green goblin huddles on the ground, crying in dread. Upon witnessing the terrifying transformation, the two civilian travelers drop their bags on the ground and flee in total panic. The soldier takes a heavy step against the damp soil, which cracks under the incredible pressure of his new, devastating energy. Covered by a dense smoke of pure hatred, he walks slowly, radiating an unbearable murderous presence through the woods. He positions himself right before the unconscious body of the elven warrior, glaring down at her with his glowing eyes and zero mercy. The sergeant extends his hand with sharp claws toward the young woman's head, preparing to crush it without hesitation, but a sudden and sweet memory of his pet slime calling out to him echoes in his mind, breaking the trance of hatred. He hesitates at the last second, keeping his hand open in the air while trying desperately to contain his murderous rage. His red eyes begin to return to normal as he takes a deep breath, regaining his consciousness in the middle of the forest. He looks back and sees that the pool of slime has begun to glow intensely on the grass, starting a regeneration process. The small slime dookie emerges completely reformed and glowing, making a joyful sound to everyone's surprise. But besides him, two new slimy parts begin to move and stretch out on the damp grass right near where the sergeant is standing. The military phone begins to glow brightly, indicating on the screen that a fatal glitch has been detected in the combat system. The screen flashes, displaying the image of his late sergeant and reminding the young man of his duty to live on and seek happiness. One of the new little creatures generated by the slime's magical splitting emerges, making a cute noise and being named Pino. The other small, pink slammy being stretches out joyfully, receiving the affectionate name Sini from its new human master. The otherworldly system announces that the incredible passive skill of reproduction by fission has been successfully activated. Sergeant Lee John holds the 3 cute slimes in his arms, while the Green Goblin watches the scene with great curiosity. He looks down at the 3 small creatures with a much softer and more affectionate gaze, setting aside all his previous combat fury. The soldier gathers his new companions and begins to walk away, leaving the unconscious elf lying on the forest floor. In her mind, Celia finds herself floating in a vast and silent landscape of pink clouds, appearing to be in a distant dream. She looks around confused, not understanding where she is or how she ended up in that highly unusual and mysterious place in her mind. Suddenly, the terrifying silhouette of the orc in a rage reappears before her with sharp claws and highly pointed teeth. The young elf enters complete panic as she relives the dread of that deadly clash that nearly took her life in the forest. She wakes up with a start in the real world, screaming that she urgently needs to report that terrible threat to her leaders. She reaches her hand to her head in desperation, thinking about alerting the council about the dangerous orc shaman she encountered in the dark woods. But upon touching her own forehead, the elven warrior notices something very strange and enters a state of absolute shock right then and there. She realizes in desperation that her sacred golden tiara has completely vanished, leaving her without her connection artifact. The young woman begins to tremble with dread upon noticing that her entire mystical connection with her own elven race has been severed for good. For the first time in 150 years of existence, the proud elven warrior finds herself completely alone in the world. She recalls with horror the moment her precious and sacred headpiece shattered completely during the battle. In a panic, she begins to cry softly, begging that this is all just a terrible, passing nightmare. The elf calls out desperately for the protection of the mother tree, begging for help in the middle of that immense darkness of the woods. Weeping, she calls for her commander Kalian, saying she does not want to be abandoned by her people in such a cruel manner. In her deepest nightmares, she sees herself being devoured by the giant mouth of a terrible and frightening green dragon. Screaming for help, she clings desperately to the legs of a figure that emerges in the middle of her panicked illusion. A handsome and mysterious young man with dark hair holds her in his arms with extreme gentleness, comforting the frightened elf. The handsome savior from her dream looks into her eyes with tenderness and asks, in a soothing voice, for her to not be afraid of anything from now on. Celia gazes at the young man's face, feeling her heart calm down with the kind words of that mysterious dream presence. He settles her affectionately into his lap and offers a bowl with a mysterious liquid to help her recover her senses. She feels welcomed by that serene and deep voice while she looks at the purplish broth being offered with affection. The elf blushes slightly upon feeling the gentle and protective touch of that handsome warrior who seems to have appeared to save her. While she drinks the broth, the system initiates an attempt to tame the level 150 elven warrior. Upon opening her eyes, she asks if he is an angel, but finds herself facing the masked sergeant presenting himself merely as an instructor. He explains calmly that people can be angels or demons, depending solely on their actions in that new world. The sergeant stares at her with seriousness and asks directly if she is already feeling a bit better after taking the medicine. The goblins appear laughing in a creepy way behind their master, commenting that their medicine truly works miracles in the woods. Celia looks at the bowl of purple soup with pieces of frog lead and spits it all out in horror upon realizing what she just consumed. She spits the entire soup directly onto the face and chest of Sergeant Lee Jian, who is left completely paralyzed with disgust right there. Piercing scream of anger and disgust echoes through the entire Green Valley, startling the birds that fly away from the forest. Celia appears fully tied up inside a sturdy canvas sack, shouting furiously at the sergeant to untie her this instant. She thrashes desperately on the ground, promising to wipe out all those green monsters as soon as she manages to free herself. The sergeant scratches his head in boredom, calling her a noisy prisoner and warning that she must behave if she wants to live. Suddenly, the elf's mouth is sealed by an invisible force, preventing her from continuing to yell at her captors. She enters shock upon realizing she was targeted by a powerful body, control magic cast by a mere orc shaman. The sergeant stands thoughtfully with his arms crossed, while the fallen elf and the two goblins watch him in complete silence. The small ones celebrate impressively, praising the master for managing to subdue that arrogant elf with such ease. Li Jian gets extremely confused by the praise and wonders mentally when it was that he controlled anyone nearby. He picks up his military phone to check the system notifications and try to understand what actually happened in the fight. The sergeant stares at the terrible purple soup with suspicion, while the goblins guarantee that it is their best medicine in the woods. Feeling responsible, the sergeant holds the elf in his arms, while the goblins suggest healing her so they can fight her again later. The system warns that giving the goblins healing potion failed to tame the level 150 elf in a direct manner. But her strong mental resistance causes the system to attempt a purely physical body control magic bypassing her mind. The body control is activated with absolute success, and the sergeant instantly learns the basic language of the elves around there. Thoughtful, the young sergeant tries to understand the practical difference between taming and simply controlling a wild creature. He remembers the time at the pet shop when taming meant simply creating bonds of trust and affection with the small reptiles. The soldier stares at the bound prisoner, wondering if he really managed to tame the proud elf from another world. To test his new ability, the sergeant gives a direct order to sit, making the small blue goblin obey instantly. Next, he commands everyone to stand up, and the tied-up elf rises instantly, obeying the involuntary command. With a new command to sit, the elf drops to her knees on the ground, confirming the absolute power of his control magic. Seeing the young elf grumbling furiously through the invisible gag, the sergeant gives a direct order for her to speak freely. As soon as she regains her voice, she shouts furiously, promising that she will hunt down and eliminate that cursed orc shaman in the name of her race. But with a simple command for silence, her mouth snaps shut, interrupting Celia's flood of threats. The sergeant observes the prisoner thrashing in the canvas sack, concluding that he does indeed have full control over her body. He wonders if this absurd power of domination was something he acquired along with his new orc body in that world. He recalls that all his severe injuries, caused by the elf earlier, were completely healed by the system. The young man remembers that he ended up losing consciousness during the most critical and violent moment of that terrible battle in the woods. He holds only vague and distant memories of having felt a wild fury and a superhuman physical strength in his chest. The soldier relives the moment he brandished his combat rifle with eyes flashing in pure hatred amid the smoke of conflict. The system reveals that the surgeon's painful memories ended up triggering a severe post-traumatic stress state in him. He sighs in relief and wipes his forehead, concluding that entire outburst of fury was just a reflex of his stress. Sitting before his new subordinates, the sergeant admits to himself that he is extremely confused by the whole situation. There are too many incomprehensible things at once, but he knows that his military goal of survival remains untouched. He looks at the photo of his friend, swearing that he will survive and return to his world to fulfill his final solemn promise. With his focus completely renewed on survival, the sergeant assumes a firm and decided stance before his commands. He shouts, ordering everyone to gather immediately to begin a new and rigorous military training routine. The soldier warns that he still does not trust their loyalty, but that he is willing to give them a chance to prove their worth. He delivers a speech saying that in his world of origin, only extreme strength and arduous training guarantee the right to live. He promises to teach the survival techniques of his world, and in exchange, demands that the goblins help him get back home. They celebrate, saying they are no longer afraid of anything, but the sergeant quickly ruins the moment by saying he is not their master. He warns that he is not an alien monster like them, but the small ones cling to his leg, insisting they are of the same race. He closely monitors his soldiers' physical progress to see if they will be worthy of becoming his right-hand men. Next, the soldier initiates a close quarters combat drill with daggers, forcing the goblins to fight him seriously. One of the small ones delivers a powerful punch into a wooden target, leaving the proud captive elf completely stunned. Cilia watches the scene on her knees and admits in fright that she was wrong about those creatures' real combat potential. She notices the small slime, Pino, transform perfectly into a golden combat pistol, shining under the daylight. The elf stares at the goblins, working in a highly organized manner to sew military protective vests for the group. The surgeon emerges imposingly, wearing a tactical vest and a combat cloak alongside his small uniformed goblins. She stares at the masked man, thinking that in all her 150 years of existence, she had never seen anything so bizarre. Cilia swallows hard, completely terrified, admitting to herself that she has never witnessed such a peculiar army in her life. She watches the green goblin reload and fire the pistol with military precision against the training targets of that base. The entire group practices their aim, firing in perfect synchronization under the relentless command of the masked surgeon there. With the precise shots destroying the targets, she concludes in fright that this orc is indeed a monster among monsters. Alone in the camp, she stares at the bag with the soldiers' belongings, determined to send an urgent report to her council. She tries desperately to move her bound body to reach the bag where her sacred tiara is kept. The elven warrior strains her leg muscles, trying to crawl silently across the dirt to reach her goal. Suddenly, the surgeon appears from behind and grabs her shoulder, coldly warning that it is now her turn to show up for training. Meanwhile, in a nearby human village, one of the travelers screams desperately, alerting everyone to the presence of monsters. He yells that an army of orcs has appeared on the mountain behind the village and angrily questions why no one believes his words. The elderly village chief leans on his wooden staff, asking with disdain if they are going to start up with the orc rumors all over again. The young traveler tries to convince the village chief that he saw a terrible orc shaman defeat the elven warrior in the woods. He insists they need to alert the local lord and form a militia, while mysterious figures watch from the background. But the village chief doubts the bizarre story, while the surgeon and his group watch hidden in the bushes. Legion observes the argument from afar, wondering why orcs and elves would even come to such an insignificant village. Hidden in the woods, the surgeon decides to act and seriously orders Cilia to take a step forward in the camp. The proud elf complains about receiving orders from a monster, but the soldier commands her to be silent right away. He points to the civilians speaking in a strange language and asks if the elf can translate that conversation for him. Cilia shouts angrily, refusing to help until she sees that the surgeon is holding the pieces of her sacred tiara. She is shocked to see that the orc recognized her valuable instrument for mental communication with the other elves. Legion states that he doesn't know the object's history but says he is entirely willing to return it to her. However, he warns that the slimes seem to want compensation for having been split into 3 parts because of her. The surgeon kneels in front of the elf and calmly says he will give her some time to think over his proposal. Cilia is confused when the soldier extends his hand and calmly begins a countdown from 3. She tries to protest, but the surgeon maintains his cold look and continues the countdown, lowering another finger. As soon as he reaches the number 1, the small slime moves forward, licking and beginning to melt the elf's precious adornment. Desperate, she agrees to translate the conversation, causing the surgeon to dryly order her to begin the work. Cilia grinds her teeth, thinking that only heartless monsters would be capable of such cruel blackmail. The elf mentally swears that she will get revenge with the eternal hatred of her race as soon as she regains her connection with her people. Meanwhile, the village chief says that orcs lie very far from there and that the peasants should not believe in rumors. But the young peasant insists that he thought so too until he saw the terrible monster with his own eyes in the forest. He repeats the urgency of setting up a militia for defense, but a cynical voice emerges, cutting off their discussion. A gang of mercenaries appears, and the leader mocks them, asking if the residents do not trust the guild's protection. The blonde-haired man proudly states states that this entire village is under the exclusive protection of his criminal band. He questions if arming the residents without a good reason wouldn't just end up creating terrible trouble throughout the region. An outraged villager accuses the group of being nothing but a gang of thugs who extort illegal fees from anyone passing through. The peasant complains about the exploitation against the village, while the leader of the collectors merely cracks his knuckles in anger. With a swift movement, the blonde thug delivers a violent punch to the villager's face, who drops from the impact. The village chief panics and begs desperately for the attackers to stop that violence right there. The gang leader holds the fallen man by the collar with a sadistic smile and tells him to control himself once and for all. Hidden in the brush, the sergeant and Celia watch in silence the cowardly beating of the worker in the village square. The elf whispers in anger, blaming the green monsters for that injustice and calling them all beings without a conscience. Ignoring the insults, the sergeant draws his pistol and orders the goblin to use only non-lethal force in that action. The blonde thug prepares another cruel strike against the fallen villager, laughing out loud and saying he is going to crush his opponent. Suddenly, a precise shot strikes the attacker right in the face, bruising his face with the force of the physical impact. The blonde villain collapses, knocked out on the ground, leaving the surviving villagers completely paralyzed in shock there. The residents scream in panic, believing the sound of the shot was actually the terrifying roar of the legendary orc shaman. In the middle of the woods, Li Jian complains about hitting the target and tells little Dookie to focus closely on target practice. The sergeant declares that the reconnaissance mission was a success and orders the immediate withdrawal of his entire group. Celia stares at the soldier with a highly surprised expression as he gives the final order for everyone to move out. Suddenly, a yellow reptile appears, screeching loudly right in the middle of the path, interrupting the soldier's quick retreat. The sergeant shouts, calling for the green goblin, who runs forward, brandishing his pistol with great readiness against the monster. Next, he tells the blue goblin to advance in perfect synchronization, preparing their weapons to neutralize the threat. The small green combatant slides agilely underneath the yellow beast, pointing his tactical pistol straight at the target. The blue partner provides cover from the flank, positioning himself strategically to corner the monster in the woods. The two small soldiers fire at the same time, hitting the reptile with multiple non-lethal rubber projectiles. With extreme agility, the blue goblin performs a quick reload of his pistol, demonstrating live fire techniques. The yellow creature roars in pain upon being struck by multiple precision shots that drain its strength in the fight. The reptile visibly weakens, its eyes blinking in desperation as its claws lose their grip on the ground. Unable to resist the tactical attack, the monster collapses defeated on the ground, knocking over his opponent's weapons. The green goblin looks at the sergeant with great pride for having successfully completed another difficult combat in the forest. The green goblin fires his non-lethal pistol straight into the wild reptile's mouth to halt the enemy's advance in the woods. Meanwhile, the small blue goblin approaches from behind with speed, preparing a sharp bone dagger to strike. The blue warrior runs at high speed with his blade drawn, demonstrating great agility in his tactical movement. With extremely swift strikes, he attacks the yellow monster's legs, preventing the creature from managing to escape. The small combatant drives his sharp blade into the opponent's heel, immobilizing it with great combat precision. He spins his bone dagger with enormous skill, showing the results of the intense and rigorous weapons training. The goblin performs an acrobatic movement in the air, landing another precise cut on the giant forest reptile's tail. The large monster collapses, completely knocked out on the ground under military immobilization tactics taught by the sergeant. The small soldier stands triumphant after demonstrating complete mastery of close quarters combat techniques. Li Jian approaches his charges, who are celebrating happily, while he reflects on the extreme hardships of conflict. He recalls when civilian and military instructors united on Earth to train young recruits to survive. Whether in the traffic police or the fire department, everyone helped prepare the army to face the chaos of combat. The sergeant remembers that cooperation and effort of each citizen at their post guaranteed their survival on the front lines. He ponders that in an organized society, securing quality food and safe shelter makes the duty to live much easier. In the clearing, the Green Goblin applies a bandage to his partner's arm, while the sergeant assesses the stamina of his exhausted troops. The soldier stares at the group gathered near the campfire and calculates if they possess the strength to completely take over the nearby village. The sergeant notes that the hard life in the jungle has made the goblins highly resilient and quick to learn any defense tactic. He also observes his slimes, which can now split to fire projectiles in a much larger quantity than before. With a smile, the sergeant pats the head of the yellow lizard, which now lies down calmly by his side without showing any danger. The young man realizes that feeding the beasts properly and maintaining a strict hierarchy are the basic rules for taming. The phone display confirms with success that the fearsome wild reptile has been fully tamed by the otherworldly system. Li Jian names the creature Q, while the elf Cilia watches from afar, frightened by that group's growing strength. The sergeant concludes that they now possess enough firepower to carry out small, tactical raiding operations in the region. However, the soldier analyzes his equipment and notices that one essential element is still missing for the group's survival. He realizes that without a long-range communication system, it would be impossible to coordinate more complex combat tactics. While he schemes new war strategies in silence, Cilia approaches shouting and demanding his attention in the camp. The elf states with open arms that she did everything requested and demands to receive her sacred golden tiara back this very hour. The sergeant holds out his hand, gripping the glowing adornment, and asks with apparent disdain if she is talking about that little object. Cilia flashes a malicious and triumphant smile, believing she will finally manage to recover her precious artifact of power. She extends her hands joyfully to take the item, while preparing to mock the naivety of the orc who kept her captive. But the sergeant pulls the object back at the last second and asks why she is so obsessed with that worthless golden piece of jewelry. Cilia backs away, startled and speechless, while the sergeant recalls the suspicious behavior he witnessed from the village mercenaries. He remembers the assaults against the peasants and notes that the blonde band's violent attitude seemed to follow a training pattern. The sergeant concludes that the actions of that militia actually corresponded to a very clear tactic of military drilling. Desperate with his discovery, the young elf thinks to herself that she needs to alert the Council of Light as quickly as possible. Lying, she claims that the jewelry was an heirloom left by her late mother, but the sergeant demands that she be honest with him. Left with no way out, she confesses furiously that she will use the tiara's signal to expose the monsters and call for reinforcements to crush his head. A tense silence takes over the area as the two stare fixedly at each other under the dim light passing through the tree crowns. Realizing she ruined her only chance of escape by revealing her plan, the elven warrior bites her lips and cries out of pure frustration. But the sergeant ignores her tears and focuses solely on the technical terms, thoughtfully repeating about that long-range signal. He holds the golden accessory up against the moonlight and asks if that little object really serves to communicate at a distance. Under the terrified gaze of the prisoner, the soldier brings the tiara close to his own head with a calm and highly decided gesture. He places the sacred adornment on his forehead to the utter surprise and despair of Cilia, who watches everything completely paralyzed. The young elf opens her mouth in dread and lets out a whisper of despair upon realizing what the orc sergeant has just done before her. She screams, trying to stop him, but a powerful wave of magical energy propagates through the air the instant the object is activated on him. A beam of mystical light ignites, connecting the sergeant's mind with the projection of an imposing and unfamiliar elven silhouette. Li Jian finds himself in a completely white mental space, coming face to face with the proud commander Kalian of the Guild of Light.